When you inherit a fortune at age 3, everyone around you suddenly develops an opinion about what's best for you, who you should marry, where you should live, how you should spend the money they wish was theirs. By the time you're old enough to make your own decisions, you've already learned that genuine affection and calculated interest often wear identical faces, speak in the same reassuring tones, and claim to want only your happiness. Sunny von Bülow discovered this truth in the most devastating way possible, learning too late that the European aristocrat she'd married came with a very specific timeline in mind, one where her continued existence had become inconvenient to his plans. What makes her story particularly chilling isn't the wealth or the Newport mansions or the society scandal that would captivate America, but rather the slow realization that the person sleeping beside you might be counting down the days until you're no longer an obstacle. In today's episode of Old Money Allure, we investigate how a railway heiress worth $75 million became the victim in America's first televised murder trial, revealing why sometimes the greatest danger to extraordinary wealth isn't theft or bankruptcy, but the people who've learned that inheritance beats divorce in the financial mathematics of marriage. Private railway carriage hurtling between Virginia and New York became the unlikely delivery room for Martha Sharp Crawford on September 1st, 1932, privilege literally in motion from the moment she drew breath. George Washington Crawford had built his fortune on fossil fuels, commanding Columbia Gas and Electric, while oil and natural gas gushed from his Pennsylvania properties like black gold geysers. 3 years after Sunny's unusual arrival, Crawford departed permanently, leaving his toddler daughter $100 million, $2 billion in current value, along with an emotional void no trust fund could fill. The motherless heiress split her childhood between Fifth Avenue overlooking Central Park and the Tamerlane estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, ferried between palaces by a Rolls-Royce and driver who knew her moods better than any parent. Beauty came as naturally to Sunny as wealth. Vogue crowned her among the world's best-dressed women, while observers drew the inevitable Grace Kelly comparisons that followed her like expensive perfume. Depression stalked her through finishing school hallways and debutante balls, a shadow presence that champagne and shopping sprees could temporarily blur but never banish. A Swiss ski resort in 1957 provided the setting for Sunny's introduction to Prince Alfred Eduard Friedrich Vincenz Martin Maria von Auersperg, a tennis instructor whose lineage vastly exceeded his bank balance. The Austrian prince traced his bloodline to medieval nobility, but the collapse of the Habsburg Empire had reduced him to trading on his backhand and title with American heiresses seeking European validation. July 1957 saw Martha Crawford transformed into Princess von Auersperg, adding 2 children to the nobility's ranks, Princess Annie-Laurie Aller and Prince Alexander Georg. Prince Alfred's commitment to monogamy proved as unstable as his finances. Affairs proliferated like unpaid bills, including a particularly public dalliance with Italian actress Gina Lollobrigida. By 1965, Sunny had endured enough continental infidelity, securing an amicable divorce that left her with the children and him with whatever remained of his reputation. Enter Klaus Cecil Borberg at a Manhattan dinner party, a Danish charlatan who'd crafted himself a new identity as meticulously as any forger working in basement light. Copenhagen birthed him on August 11th, 1926, to playwright Sven Borberg, whose Nazi collaboration earned 4 years in prison after the Allies sorted through the wreckage. The son escaped to Britain during wartime, appropriating his maternal grandfather's surname, Bülow, then illegally tacking on von, aristocratic garnish for his invented persona. Working for J. Paul Getty by the 60s, Claus occupied that nebulous space between secretary and confidant, close enough to power to absorb its mannerisms without wielding any himself. June 6, 1966 brought another marriage for Sunny, this time with prenuptial terms that would prove prophetic. Divorce meant Claus received nothing, but her death would deliver $14 million. Newport's Clarendon Court became their primary stage. 21 rooms of Georgian grandeur previously featured in high society. The Grace Kelly film that seemed to follow Sonny everywhere. Daughter Cosima arrived in 1967, completing their surface perfection, while Klaus began calculating how long he'd need to maintain the marriage charade. Alexandra Isles changed the equation, a dark shadows actress who'd portrayed the Gothic soap opera's original Victoria Winters and understood dramatic timing. By 1979, she'd issued her ultimatum, 6 months for Klaus to divorce Sonny and marry her, or their affair would end like a cancelled series. December 27th, 1979, dawned with Sonny von Bülow unconscious in her Newport bedroom, while her husband calmly read newspapers downstairs, insisting she merely needed sleep. The previous evening's eggnog had mixed poorly with Sonny's hypoglycemia, a condition making alcohol as dangerous as poison, yet she'd consumed several glasses at the family Christmas party. Alexander von Auersperg had helped his stumbling mother to bed, attributing her uncoordination to holiday excess rather than the first act of attempted murder. 9:30 the next morning brought Maria Schrahlhammer racing upstairs, the German maid's 23 years of service preparing her for many things, but not the death rattle emanating from her employer's throat. Sonny lay grey and gasping, her body rejecting consciousness, while Klaus rejected Maria's frantic pleas to summon medical help immediately. 9 hours passed, 9 hours of Sonny's brain starving for glucose, before Klaus finally allowed doctors to intervene in what he insisted was merely alcoholic stupor. Newport Hospital's tests revealed the smoking gun, blood sugar dangerously low, but insulin levels at 214, nearly double the lethal threshold that would kill a non-diabetic. Intravenous dextrose sparked Sonny back to life, though her blood sugar paradoxically dropped further, a reaction occurring only when massive insulin doses circulate through the system. She awakened with zero memory of the incident, but Maria filed every detail in her mind's evidence locker, particularly Klaus's inexplicable delay and casual demeanour during the crisis. February 1980 brought Maria's most disturbing discovery while organising closets in the Manhattan apartment. A black leather bag hidden among Klaus's belongings, like a serial killer's trophy case. Inside lay glass vials, prescription bottles, syringes, and most alarmingly, a container clearly marked insulin, medication for a disease Sonny had never been diagnosed with. The maid shared her discovery with Alexander and Isla, the three forming an unlikely detective agency monitoring the bag's movements between Newport and New York. April delivered another medical crisis, Sonny hospitalised again with hypoglycemic symptoms, though doctors found no explanation beyond her known blood sugar condition. Alexandra Iles's deadline ticked closer, 6 months transforming into 3, then 2, pressure mounting like a syringe plunger, pressing poison into veins. December 21st, 1980 arrived with grim symmetry, another Christmas gathering at Clarendon Court, where Sonny displayed familiar symptoms: confusion, poor coordination, slurred speech. Family members guided her to bed again, but morning brought no recovery. Only Sonny sprawled across cold marble bathroom tiles in irreversible coma. Tests confirmed what the family already suspected: astronomical insulin levels inconsistent with any natural medical condition, consistent only with injection. The second attempt had succeeded where the first failed, Sonny's brain too damaged from prolonged hypoglycemia to ever emerge from the vegetative state. Maria confronted the reality that her 9-hour vigil the previous year had merely delayed the inevitable, that Klaus had simply refined his technique for the second attempt. Alexander and Alla hired former New York County District Attorney Richard Koo, whose $400,000 investigation would transform family suspicions into criminal charges. The black bag's contents would be tested, witnesses interviewed, and a narrative constructed that painted Klaus as a methodical would-be murderer who viewed his wife as an obstacle to wealth and remarriage. America's first televised murder trial opened February 2, 1982 in Newport Superior Court, transforming Rhode Island into ground zero for a scandal mixing insulin with inheritance. Crowds assembled before dawn, seeking the 80 available seats, treating the proceedings like Broadway theatre, featuring real blood and actual billionaires. Prosecutor Stephen Famiglietti outlined a simple narrative. Klaus von Bülow had twice attempted to murder his wife using insulin injections, motivated by $14 million and a mistress's ultimatum. Maria Schrollhammer commanded the witness stand, a greying German maid whose accented testimony about finding Madame near death, while Mr. von Bülow refused to call doctors, proved devastating. She described the black bag discovery with precision, each detail: the insulin vial, the syringes, the inexplicable presence of diabetic medication for a non-diabetic woman, building the prosecution's case. Alexandra Isles followed with soap opera timing, revealing how Claus had confessed to watching Sonny slip deeper into the first coma before finally summoning help. The actress confirmed their affair and her marriage ultimatum, providing the motive that transformed medical mystery into attempted murder. Harvard's Dr. George Cahill testified with 90% certainty that insulin caused the second coma, while Dr. Robert Bradley pushed further, 100% certainty on the first incident. Defense attorney Harold Price Faringer painted Sonny as self-destructive, an alcoholic pill popper whose comas resulted from her own excesses rather than her husband's plotting. Celebrity depositions from Truman Capote and Joanne Carson claimed intravenous drug use was commonplace in the von Bülow household, though gossip carried less weight than medical evidence. The syringe from Claus's bag tested positive for insulin at its tip, physical evidence that seemed to corroborate Maria's testimony and the medical experts' conclusions. 6 days of deliberation produced the verdict on March 16th. Guilty on both counts of assault with intent to murder, each word falling like a judge's gavel in the packed courtroom. Judge Thomas Needham imposed consecutive sentences, 10 years for the first attempt, 20 for the second, though Claus remained free on bail pending appeal. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz took the case, assembling law students like a legal SWAT team to dismantle the conviction through procedural warfare. The appeal brief exposed fundamental flaws. Sonny's family had seized the black bag legally, but prosecutors analysing its contents without a warrant violated Fourth Amendment protections. Investigator Richard Koo's notes had been withheld from the defence, potentially concealing exculpatory evidence that might have changed the trial's outcome. April 27, 1984 brought vindication. The Rhode Island Supreme Court reversed both convictions in a 61-page decision ordering a complete retrial. The state would get another chance to prove Klaus's guilt, but this time he'd be defended by Thomas Puccio, the former federal prosecutor who'd sent corrupt congressmen to prison. Evidence would be restricted, witnesses cross-examined differently, and medical testimony challenged by experts who'd found alarming flaws in the insulin testing. The second trial would either confirm Klaus von Bülow as a calculated killer or expose the first verdict as a catastrophic rush to judgment based on flawed science and family vendetta. Providence Superior Court hosted the retrial beginning April 25, 1985. With Thomas Puccio dismantling the prosecution's case like a surgeon, reversing another doctor's botched operation. 8 distinguished medical experts testified for the defense. Cornell's neurology chairman, the former U.S. Toxicology Association president, forensic specialists who'd discovered the insulin tests were fundamentally compromised. British researchers had found that barbiturates and Valium could trigger false positive insulin results. Puccio's team confirmed this by submitting blind samples that tested positive, despite containing no insulin. The syringe evidence crumbled under scrutiny. Insulin encrusted on the needle's tip, rather than its base defied physics, since penetrating skin would wipe the tip clean like a squeegee. Amobarbital traces on the needle should have left telltale bruising on Sonny's body, yet examining physicians found 0 injection marks during their careful inspection. 3 weeks before her final coma, Sunny had been hospitalised after consuming 73 aspirin tablets, a suicide attempt that reframed her medical history entirely. Puccio savaged the prosecution witnesses. Maria became a biased servant, protecting her fairy tale princess from the shadowy interloper, while Alexandra Isles delivered just another melodramatic performance. June 10, 1985, brought acquittal on both counts after 14 hours of deliberation, the courtroom erupting in applause, while one spectator collapsed from emotional overload. Klaus emerged victorious but hardly vindicated. Alexander and Ayla immediately filed a $56 million civil suit, determined to achieve through money what criminal law couldn't deliver. December 1987 settlement terms read like an exile treaty. Klaus would divorce his comatose wife, abandon all inheritance claims, maintain perpetual silence about the case, and leave America forever. His daughter Cosima, who'd supported him throughout both trials, regained her place in her grandmother's $100 million will, loyalty's expensive reward. London became Claus's final refuge, a small Knightsbridge flat replacing Newport mansions, while he reinvented himself as a theatre critic, attending opening nights instead of trials. This was a tragedy satisfying all Aristotle's definitions, he'd tell rare interviewers. Everyone is wounded, some fatally. His only public commentary on the affair. Sunny existed in medical purgatory for 28 years at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, fed through tubes, while fresh flowers and family photographs decorated her unchanging room. December 6, 2008 finally ended her mechanical existence. Nearly 3 decades after that bathroom floor collapse, her body surrendering what her brain had abandoned long ago. Alan Dershowitz's book became an Oscar-winning film starring Jeremy Irons, art transforming tragedy into entertainment, while the real participants remained forever altered. Alexander and Ayla channeled their trauma into advocacy, establishing victims' rights organisations and coma research foundations bearing their mother's name. Klaus survived until May 25, 2019, dying at 92 in the London flat where he'd spent 3 decades of court-ordered silence. The question that riveted America, did he or didn't he, accompanied him to the grave, though Dershowitz himself had grown nearly certain of his client's innocence. Sunny von Bülow's story remains high society's darkest fairy tale. A princess who pricked her finger on a syringe and slept for 28 years while the world argued whether her prince had wielded the needle or merely watched her fall. And now we'd love to see you in the comments. Before this video, had you heard Sunny's story, and what was your visceral reaction to this tale? We look forward to hearing your thought below, and thanks for joining us for another episode.